right, so this is episode 2 of the van build. We are going to be working on the fabrication work for the water tank, gray water tank, and some other odds and ends. So you'll get to see the kind of the ins and outs of my shop and how it all comes together. So stay tuned and follow along. The first thing we are going to tackle is the evap canister bracket. I folded this up earlier in the day. It's made out of 1/8" aluminum. Now I'm just getting all the tabs and attachment points welded on. The reason for this is just like anything else. You move one thing and something else has to go with it, and this is that something else. So now that we have the attachment points all tacked up and ready to go, now we can fully weld it out. With the size of the bracket finished up, now we can move on to the big long stretch. Now this is over 12 inches of weld, and getting comfortable is a very, very important step to doing a very long bead continuous. Now these are some parts to the custom cross member, and for some reason I lost the footage of getting that welded in, but it's in there. Now we are on to final installation of the evap canister bracket, which is very nice because I've had this thing in and out of there probably a dozen times, figuring out the exact location where it needs to be. Now you want to always pay attention to things that are going to be moving and or could be rubbing on it. And this one I wanted to make sure there's enough clearance between the body and the bracket assembly, but also the bracket assembly and the rear axle. Now this is kind of a dead spot on E-Series, which works out very good because this evap canister kind of sits right between the two shock mounts and also shares the front shock cross member for a mounting point. So this is the end result of all that work. I built a custom aluminum bracket, custom cross member to go into place, and it's fully wired up now. The evap canister is in the correct location. We have plenty of clearance between the rear end of this at full travel. No problems there. This had to be relocated to this location because of the water tank. So with the water tank being behind the axle, there's no place for this evap canister to go because of the custom fuel tank. So with every modification, there's always something that has to happen to make it right. This one has a custom cross member in here as well to support it. And then the front side actually uses the shock cross mount member to hang the front section. And the only thing left is to put the vent line in that goes to the back. And I'll do that once the water tank is actually bolted in place. All right, so now we are jumping over to the stainless water tank. I've actually built one of these already and I didn't really like it, so this is me building another one.
So I know some people are probably going to be like, well, why did you build one and now you're building another one? So the first one just didn't fit the way I wanted it to. And me being me, I just decided to start over. I'll use the other tank for something else. Now you'll notice when I'm tacking this together, I'm using very little amperage to get these pieces of material together, because with stainless it has to be back purged for it to actually do a full continuous weld. You can tack it just barely, but beyond that you don't want to do that. You have to back purge. And with stainless, there is a lot of prep work involved. You have to keep it very clean. Has to be back purged to fully weld it. And that's a whole nother video of process to go into. Stainless water tank all finished up, and we can go ahead and kind of spot it into place underneath the van and make sure everything lines up the way it should. Get the old Harbor Freight creeper out here. Now you can see it is installed in the van. This is the final mock-up and it fits absolutely beautifully. This is how I want it. So when it's in there, you just go look at it and go, wow, that looks really nice. Now we're jumping into one of the last tank assemblies. This one is actually going to be made out of aluminum. This is not drinking water. This is a gray water tank. So we're going to use 5052 aluminum for this, which will be just fine. And we'll start shearing some pieces. Now, one of the first questions people ask me when they see my shear is, what is its capacity? And my shear is rated at 1/4 inch for aluminum at 48 inches. So that's a pretty hefty piece of aluminum that it can go through, and it does it like butter. Now we jump right over to my Chicago box and pan brake. Now this thing will pretty much bend anything you put in front of it, or it'll tear itself trying to. So you got to use it with some caution. It is an older unit, so it does have some controls on it, just not a whole bunch. It's not CNC by any means. One of those pieces of equipment, they're very hard to find, but they work amazing as long as you know how to run them. With everything folded up, now we can start working on getting it tacked together. Now, this one you can see here, I already have it kind of fitted. I have a piece of tape on that end cap there just to hold it in place right before I start putting tacks on it, and then I'll peel that tape off. And for tacks on aluminum of this thickness, I'm typically using around 225 amps at a very short burst, and just to get the actual parent material to stick together without any filler. So I started welding out the whole tank, and on this weld specifically, I got part of the way in and realized I wasn't as comfortable as I thought I was. So I had to reposition my hand, and that's something I try to avoid if possible, because then you have a start and stop point, and getting the weld to look exactly the same is a little bit tougher. So just something I try to do, and a lot of other welders out there that weld at a very high level, they try to avoid that as well. So I had to get the old calibrated block of wood out here to get myself a little bit more comfortable. Doesn't always work, but this time it worked out just fine. So I was able to get this weld finished out and get this tank at least somewhat done. And by somewhat done, I mean I had to put this tank in and out a whole bunch of times to see how close I could get it to the body and not be interfering with anything. And you can see I had to do some cutting and inlays on it and a few copes to get it as close as I could without touching the body, but still be a frame attachment point. Because this has to sit between the rock slider brackets. So I have a very narrow area that this thing can sit and not interfere with other attachments. And you can see here it fits absolutely perfect. The finished product is exactly what I want. I want it to be able to be serviced if somehow it got damaged going off-roading and not be a humongous headache. So that has to be taken into account when you're designing something like this. Thanks for watching part 2 of the van build. There's definitely a lot more content to come, so please like and subscribe, and here's a sneak peek of what's to come.